بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. As you remember, we said among different causes, the discussion about al-illatul ghayya, or the end for the action and for fa'il, is very much discussed, and it's very important discussion and somehow controversial between Muslim philosophers and some other philosophers. So we talked about this. In this part, Hakim Sabzewari rahmatullah alayhi tries to answer to some of the questions or objections. So al-Ghurratu thalitha is to remove some of the doubts about غایة. He says يليق أن نذب عن أمر العبث. One of the objections about غایة, we had it in Bidayah also, is about abas. You know, for example, sometimes we play with our beard, sometimes we play with our rings. This is from philosophical perspective called abas. Some people thought, okay, in this kind of actions, there is no purpose, there is no غایة. Hakim Sabzewari says, يليق, it is expected, it is good if we نذب, means ندافع, if we defend from the issue of abas, in the sense that to say this also has غایة. Why we should defend this? إذ دون غایة يظن أن حدث, because it is thought that abas happens without غایة. So we need to answer that even here there is غایة. فغایة فیما الیه الحركة و مالاجله غدت مشتركة. غایة is used in two senses, and sometimes there is a confusion between these two, and this causes problem. One meaning of غایة is ما إليه الحركة, what the motion is moving towards. So it's like destination for حركة. Sometimes غایة is ما لأجله الحركة, not ما إليه الحركة, what for its sake حركة takes place. For example, when a person is moving to buy something from shop, this walking, this حركة has غایة. But what is the غایة for حركة? That place, the shop. حركة doesn't have غایة in the sense of لأجله الحركة. حركة doesn't decide. But the person who is moving has غایة in the sense of ما لأجله الحركة. So there are two things that حركة towards it or because of it are two senses for غایة. And this is مشتركة لفظي. Yeah, this is equivocal. فغایة فیما الیه الحركة و ما لأجله غدت مشتركة. فغایة العاملة اولیهما. What is the غایة for القوة العاملة? Inshallah we will explain all these things. In human beings we have nafs. Philosophers say our nafs has three types of قوة: القوة العاملة, القوة الشوقية, القوة المدركة. And each of them has its own غاية. غاية العاملة means غاية القوة العاملة. The غاية for that قوة which moves us, which is in our muscles. And these muscles, cause حركة. اولیهما means ما الیه الحركة, because muscles don't decide to do something because they want to achieve something. وربما شوقية غایة كما من حيز بحيز سأما ترد. Sometimes شوقية means القوة الشوقية غایة has غاية. القوة الشوقية. قوة الشوقية we will explain is the قوة that causes قوة عاملة to do something. So first you have قوة المدركة, you understand through حس or خيال or act that something is good. Then shawq and desire takes place and it's getting stronger and stronger. Then قوة الشوقية motivates or moves قوة عاملة. And قوة عاملة then is moving us. So قوة الشوقية has also غاية. غاية is what? Sometimes you just want to move from this place to another place. You are bored with this place. سأما سأمت means I am bored, I am fed up. So sometimes you are tired from this place and you just want to go to another place. Where you go is not that much for a purpose. You just want not to be here. This harakah by itself is your غاية. But sometimes you go to another place to do something. For example, you go to another place to meet the doctor, for example, or to meet your friend, or to buy something. من حيز بحيز سأما ترد. So sometimes you enter from one place to another place because of سأما, because you are bored. وربما غایتها لا تتحد. And sometimes the end, the غاية, is not the same. So قوة عاملة and قوة شوقية, sometimes they have the same غاية, like you are tired, you want to go to another place. قوة عاملة moving towards that place, قوة شوقية moving to that place. But sometimes you go to doctor, قوة عاملة just wants to take to that place, but قوة شوقية wants meeting of doctor or meeting of the friend. So غاية is not the same. So Ayatummah Mutahhari says basically the objection here is twofold, has two sides. Sometimes we do things and they seem to have no purpose, like العبث. We play with our finger, with our beard, and it seems there is no purpose. Sometimes things happen and they seem to be like coincidence, تصادف. I go to the market and without any expectation I meet someone that I was looking for him for years. I didn't make a journey in order to meet him because I didn't know that he's there. This just happened. which is اتفاق. And there are also other things, but these are two main problems. For example, about عادة, about جزاف, about قصد ضروری, about لعب, all these different types of actions that may seem they are not done that much with purpose. We will talk about all of these things, inshallah. So, if everything has غایة, what do you say about all these cases of عبث, اتفاق, plus لعب, عادة, جزاف, قصد ضروری, all these things? Ayatummah Mutahhari says, in order to have good understanding of position of Muslim philosophers, in particular Hakim Sabzewari, we need to mention few points. There are few introductory points. First, غایة, as we said just in the beginning of lesson today, based on the poem, is used in two ways. ما الیه الحركة or ما لأجله الحركة. غایة is used in the sense of what حركة is moving towards, or what حركة is done for the sake of it. In order to explain this further, Ayatollah Mutahhari says, and we had this before, sometimes things that happen are happening at once. We call them daf'iyul wujud or aniyul wujud. They don't take time. It's not a process. It happens at once. Like what? Like when you go and hit the wall, or if there is accident, two cars hit each other. Moving towards the wall or moving towards another car takes time. But actual hitting happens at once. You cannot say it happened and then, for example, happened. You cannot say either happened or didn't happen. Either hit or didn't hit. It's daf'iyul wujud. So here there is no haraka, because haraka is tadriji. What we are talking about is tadrijiyul wujud. When something takes time to finish or to complete, this is tadrijiyul wujud. So our question is about this kind of things, not incidents like hitting the wall or hitting another car. So when there is gradual process, as soon as there is gradual process, then it's like a line. You have beginning of it, you have middle of it, you have somewhere here, but also you have end of it. So when there is tadrijiyul wujud, it has beginning, it continues, and it has an end. So every haraka has ma ilayhi al-haraka. Every haraka. Yeah, because haraka has mabda and muntaha. Every haraka has ma ilayhi al-haraka. That's not an issue. So every action, if it is in the form of haraka or gradual, has غایة in the sense of this is moving towards that. But if you mean by غایة ما لأجله الحركة, this should be for something that aims at something that has a purpose. Yeah, like a human being who decides to go somewhere to meet doctor, for example. Sometimes ma لأجله الحركة can be used for other things which are not gradual, they are daf'i. But we don't call it haraka. Like, for example, those things which are daf'i. For example, I want to go and suppose we are playing, I want to go and put my hand on the wall. So putting hand on the wall itself takes place at once, but going towards that wall to hit its haraka. Yeah? This is the first point. The second point, which is very useful and helps you here and other places, is that human nafs, you know, in philosophy, we don't have psychology in the sense of as an empirical science, but we have what we call philosophical psychology or ilmun nafs al-falsafi. So from philosophical perspective, we study human soul, and there are lots of discussions there that can help psychologists. And one of the best places is the beginning of a section on nafs in al-Aswar, al-Aqliyat al-Arba'a by Mulla Salih. So, he says, according to early philosophers, human faculties or quwa are three. القوة العاملة، القوة الشوقية، القوة المدركة. عاملة means acting faculty. This is the one which is responsible for our motions, for our haraka, through the power which is spread in our muscles. We decide and then we move. Of course, sometimes we do these things voluntarily or willingly, deliberately. There's irada, like I move and walk. But there are motions that take place in our body that they happen taba, naturally, like blood circulation. You don't decide and say, okay, now I want my blood to be circulated for half an hour. Whether you know it or you don't know it, whether you want it or you don't want it, it happens. You are asleep, and still this happens. So, قوة عاملة is responsible for haraka. Sometimes it is through our will and irada that it does this. Sometimes it is through our nature and taba that this happens. The second is al-Quwwatu al-Shawqiyya. Shawq means eagerness. This is responsible for our desires and inclinations, whether it would be natural desires and inclinations or acquired desires and inclinations. Like desire for food, for clothing, for resting, for power, for being father or mother, or for being a child, desire for knowledge, for truth, for worship, arts, industry, etc. So there is a faculty inside us that is responsible for these desires. But this faculty by itself depends on another faculty, which is al-Quwwatul Mudrakah. Before your Quwwatul Mudrakah says something is good, you don't have desire for it. Either good in itself or good for you, etc. So, al-Quwwatul Mudrakah is responsible for understanding and informing our mind. So by processing, analyzing, criticizing, it comes to some kind of understanding. Sometimes it's through hawas, five senses. Sometimes it is through hawas batini, the inner hawas like khiyal or memory. Khiyal is for imagination, hafiza for memory, or qawway aql, the rational faculty, or tafakkur. Aql and tafakkur are very close to each other here. He says, in our voluntary actions, all these three are involved. Number 3, Muslim philosophers say, al-Amilatu tahta al-Shawqiyya. Maybe even, Aristotle. Wa-Shawqiyyatu tahta al-Mudraka. So among these three, al-Amila, al-Shawqiyya, al-Mudraka, the order is like this. That Quwwatul Amila is the last one. But before Quwwa Amila is Quwwa Shawqiyya. Quwwa Shawqiyya triggers Quwwa Amila. But before Quwwa Shawqiyya itself is what? Quwwa Mudraka. So first Quwwa Mudraka, then Quwwa Shawqiyya, then Quwwa Amila. Because your shawq is result of your idrak, your understanding. Every voluntary action first comes from Quwwa Amila. But Quwwa Amila itself is preceded by Quwwa Shawqiyya. Shawqiyya by Mudraka. He says the responsibility or the function of Quwwa Mudraka is to pass on the information and data to Quwwa Shawqiyya. And Quwwa Shawqiyya then triggers Quwwa Amila. So they say al-Amilatu tahta al-Shawqiyya wa al-Shawqiyyatu tahta al-Mudraka. Pardon?
Where's irada here? You have Quwwa Mudraka, Shawqiyya, and Amila. Where's irada?
Irada is a strong shawq. Shawq mu'akkad, then irada. So when your yearning intensifies, then you make your decision.
So it's between Shawqiyya and Amila.
Yes. Yes. He says, suppose you are walking on the street and then you see on the display of a bookshop a book. You read the name of the author, the title of the book, and then you go inside the bookshop, get the book, have a look. Have a look, and you find, for example, that this is a good book, and you decide to pay and buy this book. So, what motivated you? What led you desire buying this book? The fact that you saw. So it was through seeing. Quwwa Mudraka acted here through seeing. You saw on the display this book. When you read it, the title, the author, the subject, then you developed shawq. And then that shawq led to muscles, going to that place. So what we can understand then from this explanation is that these three faculties, al-Quwwatul Amila, al-Quwwatul Shawqiyya, al-Quwwatul Mudraka, are not at the same level. There's a hierarchy. And among different faculties that we have for understanding, for idrak, what is normally making the action or is involved making the action is قوه خیال and قوه عقلانی, either through imagination or through rational decisions. Number 4, قوه مدركة has 3 or 4 levels. The level of ihsas, perception, the level of khayal, imagination, the level of aqila, reason and thinking. And some people also have mentioned wahima, and some people have said no, wahima is the same as these 3, it's in one of these 3. 5, we said every action has غایة, which means every action has its own غایة, and you should expect from that action this particular غایة. So from every faculty also you should expect its own غایة. Don't think because قوة عاقلة and for example or خيالية or حسية as مدركة and قوة شوقية and قوة عاملة, don't think because they are for one person then they should be the same. Each of them has its own غایة, and inshallah you will explain. So for Mr. so and so, each قوة may have its own, not always necessarily, but sometimes قوة عاقلة has its own غایة, قوة عاملة شوقية have their own. Point 6, sometimes there is collaboration and coordination between these قوا, these faculties, and sometimes there is no. Sometimes we think, then we develop shawq, then we decide and do something. There is harmony. So this is good. But sometimes maybe it's done by force. For example, you are afraid of your life and you do something that if it was normal condition you would not have done it. Sometimes aql is not involved or listened to. Sometimes one faculty may not be active at all and other faculties are working. Point 7, we said غایة has 2 meanings, ما الیه الحركة and ما لأجله الحركة. Now we can say it in different way. We can say غایة is sometimes غایة فعل and sometimes غایة فاعل. If it is غایة الفعل, غایة for action, then it is ما إليه الحركة. If it is غایة الفاعل, then it is ما لأجله الحركة. Philosophers also say always قوة عاملة and the end of action have the same purpose, because قوة عاملة is pushing us towards that thing. So that action also has the same end. But the غاية for قوة شوقية or مدركة is sometimes the same as غاية of fail and sometimes they are not the same, they are different. Now let us see what is the activity of each of these 3 قوى. The activity of القوة العاملة is to make that حركة, going, walking, running. So the main activity is what? ایجاد همان حرکت مفروض, to create that action, that حركة, that motion. غایت قوه شوقیه is بعث و تحریک قوه عامله to raise and trigger قوه عامله. So قوه عامله does the حركة, قوه شوقیه triggers قوه عامله, and قوه مدرکه triggers قوه شوقیه by creating شوق and desire. Because through idrak you come to this conclusion that this is something good and you would desire, or something bad then you wouldn't desire. So he says غایة of قوة عاملة is always ما الیه الحركة, always ما الیه الحركة. So for us muscles are like jamadat, yeah, because just means moving. Haraka you cannot say is caused by muscles thinking or planning or making decision. غایت قوه شوقیه is a particular pleasure, because you know when you satisfy your desire, what happens? You have pleasure. So in قوه شوقیه you develop yearning for going somewhere, for example, and when you go you get some pleasure. قوه خیال also imagination, you get some pleasure from your imagination. But قوه عاقله, its end is to understand مصالح کلیه, general interests for yourself, for humanity. So every faculty, every قوة wants to reach its own perfection, but they have different perfections. So قوة شوقية wants to achieve more pleasure, more shawq, more yearning. And then he talks about idrak. He says sometimes it's idrak khiyali, sometimes it's idrak aqli, and of course we know sometimes it's idrak ihsasi. He says idrak khiyali is juz'i, idrak aqli is kulli. Sometimes all of a sudden it comes to your mind that let me go next to the window and from window look at the street. This is juz'i. So your shawq is coming after you thought about it for just moving to that place next to the window. But if it is aqli, means it's kulli. Sometimes you do something because your act says that you need to, for example, educate yourself so that you can get a good certificate and then you can get good job, etc. So aql is dealing with kulliyat. Now, knowing this, let's go to the issue of abath. Those who say there is no ghaya here, they think we should go for ghayat of qawway aqileh. And here aql has not made any decision or assessment. But we say, what about the action itself? What about qawway amileh? What about qawway shawqiyah? They all have their ghaya. This person needs qawway amileh to be active, and qawway amileh to be active needs qawway shawqiyah. The only thing is that he has not rationally come to this point. Yeah? If something is done just by engagement of qawwiyya amileh and qawwiyya shawqiyya, it's abath, because aql has not approved it. If qawwiyya shawqiyya and amileh are moving towards something and they don't manage to reach, if they manage to reach, okay. But if they don't manage to reach, then this is called batil. So abeth means when they have actually reached. Batil is when they haven't reached. If it reaches its غایة, but the غایة is only imagination and khayal, it's called gazaf, arbitrary. If another thing has role, if it is a trait of character, it's called adiyat, ordinary things. If their nature or disposition, mizaj, has impact, then it is called qasd zaruri. For example, a person who is ill on bed has pain, sometimes moves to the right, to the left, So some people may think this person has no purpose, but we say, no, there is purpose for قوة عاملة, for قوة شوقية. Yes, maybe he doesn't think rationally to make, arguments and proof. But قوة شوقية, when he thinks about moving, he has shawq and then قوة عاملة. Your question?
So we have knowledge, but it is not rational. It is not rational.
Yeah, we don't call it knowledge. We say idrak, perception.
How can that idrak?
Khiyal, can be khiyal. Imagination. So, yes.
These kind of idrak that you're talking about should be conscious, or it can happen unconsciously too. Because not every time we do something, like for example playing with computers, we do not perceive something consciously to trigger the eagerness faculty in order to reach to acting faculty. And then after that comes the action of playing with the video. So the question is that if we want to do something, this action needs to be preceded by a conscious understanding or a self-conscious understanding?
No, it doesn't need to be conscious. Sometimes can be not conscious. He says, to be abath, to be done in vain, without purpose, is nisbi, is relative. So sometimes from one aspect it is abath, from another aspect it is not abath. You think playing with beard is abath, but maybe this person is playing with beard and gains some peace of mind or some focus from this person. Maybe there is a purpose. And even if there is no purpose, means there is no قوة عاقلة, so that it has its own purpose. But anyway, قوة خيالية had its own purpose. And شوقية the same. Suppose there is a student that has to be at 10 o'clock in the morning in the school. But instead of going to school, he goes to the park. Here there is a kind of disorder. Because this person, as long as his قوة عاملة is concerned, he has achieved. Because he wanted to go to the park and he went. قوة شوقية, he had shawq for going to the school, not going to school, and maybe not going to school was more. But قوة عاقلة here has no role. Because if it was left to aql would not have said leave a school and go to the park. So from قوة عاقلة, it is kind of useless. In other words, it doesn't have any result that aql would approve. Then he makes again some poems. He says, غایت فغایة لقوة في العبث مثل الطبائع دواما حاصلة. قوة عاملة has always its غایة. Yeah, because wants to do something. means it has a purpose. Whether it achieves it or not, that's another issue, but it has a purpose. قوة الشوقية, if it doesn't reach its غایة, it is called باطل. If it reaches its غایة and it has not been approved by عقل, then this is عبث. If there is no involvement for قوة الشوقية, then sometimes mizaj or khulq is involved, and this is called adi, habitual. Sometimes it is just takhayyul, like as soon as I think about playing with my beard, I will do it automatically. This is called adi, habitual. Sometimes it is because of my mizaj, my disposition, my body condition. Like a person who is ill, or a person who is breathing. When you are breathing, you don't make decision about breathing, tanaffus. Or when you are ill, God forbid, and on bed, moving, it's not in your hand. In the sense of, it's not قوة عاقلة. It's in your hand, but not قوة involvement for قوة عاقلة. So, Alhamdulillah, this section is also finished, and from next session we go to the third section of the book about ilahiyat bil ma'na al-akhas, theology in its narrower sense. So, just to summarize what we said that every haraka has غایة. But if you are talking about haraka or action, fail itself, غایة is ما إليه الحركة. If you are talking about fa'il, then let's analyze fa'il. Fa'il is human soul. Let's analyze fa'il because it looks like one. But when you analyze, there are three fa'il. Yes? One is قوية عاملة, one is شوقية, one is قوية مدركة. قوة مدركة sometimes is not that much involved, or if it is involved, it's not aql, it is just khayal or ihsas. قوة الشوقية is always involved. But maybe you don't reach what you want, then it's called batil. But we normally don't make decision to move unless we have shawq and eagerness. And قوة عاملة is the last one, that whose end is the same as the end of haraka. It's responsible for moving our muscles. So discussion here ends, and inshallah in the next session we talk about al-ilahiyat bil ma'na al-akhas. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin.